What would it mean for your business if you booked over 300 sales calls a month with your ideal customers? That's exactly what we did for one of our clients recently. In their roughly 60 days with us, we booked them 665 sales calls, and this was all with just cold email. So that's more than 10 a day. Now, those 665 calls turned into 86 closed deals and $187,000 in new revenue for this client in that same 60 days. By the way, 89% of the people we booked for this client actually showed up to the call. You're probably wondering how we pulled that off. And it comes down to 4 steps that I'm going to walk you through in this video. You can copy exactly what we did for this client, and you can run the same thing in your own business. Now, there's an order to this. Infrastructure first, then who you're going to be targeting, then what you're going to say, and then how you're going to handle the replies as they come in. Now, if you do it out of order, things downstream are going to break. So don't, skip ahead to just the copywriting stuff, because it doesn't matter how good it is if you're not landing in the inbox and they never see the message. Now, step 1 is going to be getting the sending setup right before we get into actually sending emails. The way you set this up at the beginning is going to determine whether you even land in the inbox. And so everything about copy or your list doesn't matter if this part isn't set up correctly. So to book 10 calls a day, you need positive replies coming in consistently, which means sending a good volume of cold email every day. I'm talking in some cases, tens of thousands of emails a day. Now, the thing is though, a single inbox can only safely send between, let's call it 5 and 25 cold emails a day in 2026. That depends also on whether it's a Google or Microsoft inbox and how it's set up, but generally speaking, that's the range, roughly between 5 and 25. If you go beyond that, you're going to start landing in spam. We still want to send this level of volume. It's what's required to generate results these days. So we're going to need hundreds or sometimes thousands of inboxes that are all going to be sending at the same time for the same campaign, which is why doing this with 2 or 3 alternate inboxes compared to your main business email is just not going to get you close based on where reply rates are these days. It might have worked 10, 15 years ago. You'd get a 20, 30% reply rate, but when a good campaign looks more like 2% reply rate, then you just need the numbers to be a lot bigger for this to make sense. What we're going to basically do is we're going to set up hundreds or even thousands of unrelated domains to our main business. We're going to put a few inboxes on each domain, a couple Google, or anywhere from 2 to 25 on Microsoft. And we're essentially going to horizontally scale our ability to send this volume. So we're spreading it really thin across a lot of inboxes and a lot of domains instead of forcing a lot of volume through just a few inboxes, because unfortunately for us, the filters for Google and Microsoft are really, really good at noticing what your average sending volume is, and they look for spikes. And if they see a spike, they're just going to throttle those emails and they're not going to end up in front of your prospects. Now that we accept that we're going to need a lot of inboxes, the next thing is setting them up the right way so they actually work and deliver to the inbox. Now, I mentioned this already, but I like to split inboxes across both Google and Microsoft. And if you want some private mail servers as well, but Google and Microsoft, essentially between the two of them, they route about 90% of all business email. And you're going to walk in with all of that reputation and the fact that they're generally going to privilege their own infrastructure when we're talking deliverability, right? They're so ubiquitous that it makes sense that in all likelihood, it's a higher quality business send than some of the really spammy garbage that they're trying to keep out, right? The people doing scams, phishing, etc. The nice thing about splitting between the two is they're making algorithm changes all the time. Sometimes the filters are more strict, sometimes they're looser. And the last thing you want to do is go whole hog on one of these providers and then, they change their algorithm for a few weeks and your deliverability goes to hell in a handbasket until they roll it back. So I like to spread it across the two major players, roughly 50-50 as far as the sending volume goes. And that way, if one of them gets stricter for a couple of weeks, you're only losing, roughly half your overall deliverability instead of the whole thing. Now, the next thing we're going to want to do is warm every inbox up before it sends a single cold email. And you're going to keep warming it up the entire time it's sending and frankly, just the lifetime of that domain. The reason you never stop is because the moment you do, your deliverability is going to start dropping. And the reason for this is really simple. They're looking at the metrics associated with these sending accounts to decide if it goes to the inbox or to the spam folder. And unfortunately, cold email is unsolicited. And so you're going to get a higher percentage of complaints, bounces, the negative signals that they're looking for to determine whether or not they should continue delivering your email to the inbox. So warm up is going to help puff up the numbers numbers a little bit and throw in some positive signal that should negate the negative signal that we know is going to be created by cold email. Our general ratio is about 2 warm-up emails for every cold email, so roughly a 2/3, 1/3 ratio for all the sending from the account. That keeps the provider reading your account as roughly net positive. The last piece you're going to want to think about, once we've talked about allocation and the warm-up, is masking your sending domains. Now, this is a relatively new recommendation, but essentially what we're doing here is having a hard redirect to another website is something that is relatively easy for people to figure out. So if you've got a bunch of domains that were registered somewhat recently and they're all pointing to the same spot, it indicates that you're probably sending cold email. This is the most common use case for this setup now. There is a technique called domain masking where we can essentially showcase a clone of the target website, so your main business website, so that if anybody puts in the email address into their address bar, they don't get lost. They see what they're supposed to see, but there isn't a redirect relationship that can be scraped and that could impact your domains and inboxes long term. We definitely want to have something set up. You don't want to have people putting in that address bar and getting a 404 or a blank page, but we're seeing more and more issues with blacklists, etc., for people that are just setting up a redirect to their main business domain. Our newer recommendation is to check out domain masking by providers like EmailGuard to head off that particular issue. Here's the exact setup that we ran for the client I started the video on, which was a B2B SaaS sales engagement platform. Think serving sales teams that might be looking to roll off something like a Salesforce or a HubSpot or even a Outreach.io. Now, this particular client was sending across more than 5,000 inboxes, roughly split between Microsoft and Google Workspace, all warmed up ahead of time, and all with these masking clones of the real website on the domains they're using for outreach. So that's going to give enough capacity to send over 1 million emails a month, which is really what made those lead numbers and meeting numbers possible that I started the video with. Because the infrastructure was built and warmed up before campaign started, the first campaign was able to go live in just 3 days. Usually you'd have to wait 3 to 4 weeks to really start sending. In this case, that infrastructure was already in place, and so we were able to start a lot faster. I should pause and say that first step that we've just gone through, the buying the domains, the setting up the hundreds of inboxes. I didn't even mention DNS records, which is essentially authentication for all of these emails. And if it's not properly set up, you have no chance of hitting the inbox. All of this is just generally a real pain. If you'd rather have this piece, the infrastructure, handled for you, I'm going to leave a link to Scaled Mail at the description below this video. Basically what Scaled Mail does, it's a sister company, and we set up and run your entire sending infrastructure. And we can even hand you pre-aged domains if you want to skip the warm-up time and start sending right away instead of waiting 3 to 4 weeks for your new domains to warm up. And you can start sending with confidence, knowing that everything's been set up properly. Now that your inboxes are set up and we're actually landing in the inbox, the next question you're going to run into is who you're going to send all these emails to. You probably have a first instinct to be really picky. You only want to email the companies that are a perfect fit so you don't waste any cents. But that's really going to stop you from being able to hit, let's call it 10 book calls a day, right? If you get too picky, the list gets too small, and then you just don't have enough people left to email. Because again, remember, 2% reply rate, of those, maybe 10 to 30% are interested. So we really need to send to enough people to make sure that we're getting enough out of the bottom of your funnel that you're meeting your goal. If it's 10 meetings a day or 3 or 5 or whatever it is. So we want to build a big list first and then start filtering down once we've got that base. Now, I would start by pulling a list of companies first before you get into actually people to email. For this particular client, we built these lists in BitScale, but you can do the same sort of thing in Clay, where we're pulling and we're enriching companies. We want to first gate by company level data, then enrich those companies, and it's going to save you a lot on data costs. So we can cut the companies that are a bad fit up front, and then we don't have to waste any money enriching contacts that really are companies that are not going to fit a long term. Now, for this client, we kept qualification pretty light because for the most part, it's a sales related tool. It's pretty broadly applicable. Now, there were still some clearly unqualified companies that we were able to filter out. And then at the contact level, we did some further filtering around title and seniority, people that could actually bring on a tool like this. When you need volume like 1 million emails a month, you really don't want to overfilter too much upfront. So we built a list initially of 500,000 companies and really barely any filtering at all at that first pass. So before I go too hard on all the things that you don't want to do to narrow the list too much, we definitely, once we got to the contacts, we absolutely want to run email validation on any contact that ends up on our final list, right? You do not want to be firing at dead inboxes, especially at this kind of scale. Bounces are one of the fastest ways to torch your infrastructure, and we want to keep it roughly below 2%, if not 1.5 or something like that. And if you're seeing it spike, you really need to isolate whether that's just a couple of domains that are bouncing at a high rate or whether it's across the campaign itself. Different scenarios, and I'd recommend different troubleshooting based on that. Intent signals are basically clues that a company might need what you sell right now. And then we can match those signals to the people and companies that are the best fit for our product or service that we're trying to sell. Now, in this case, this client sold to sales teams. So we went after companies that were clearly growing their sales team. They're hiring salespeople, for example, or they've just brought on a new VP or head of sales in the last 90 days. Now, we can pull these signals inside of BidScale in this case from job boards, from LinkedIn, from other active sales role postings, maybe even on the company website. We might see recent leadership changes, especially if they put out a press release or something like that. And so we're able to quickly narrow down on companies that are highly likely to need a sales related solution, or you've got a new general in the chair. They're looking to make a splash in their first 100 days or so, and bringing on a new tool and a new capability could be exactly the way to do that. So that's how we thought about which companies were most likely to need what this client was offering. We sent to them first, and we started seeing replies within the first few days. Just a couple of strategies that you can employ to narrow down your list and send effectively the right message to the right kind of people. Okay, so we've got our inboxes ready, list is built. So now it's time to actually get into writing the actual emails. And look, setup matters 100%. If you're not in front of them, they don't read the message, so it doesn't matter anyways. But bad copy will also kill your campaign results. Here's what to do using, as an example, this same client that we've been discussing. Now, when we first launched their big campaign, the copy looked great, at least to us. It addressed real pain points, seems fine, sent it out to about 15,000 people. We literally got 0 positive replies. And almost every response that we did get was negative. So we went back to figure out why the copy that had looked totally fine got no results. And it came down to a couple of things. First, most of the people we emailed didn't even know that they had the problem that we were selling them on. That was one thing. Another thing was that the copy read at too high a level, meaning it sort of read like marketing copy, and it used a bunch of jargon and kind of high-end terminology, and you could just see how people might get lost. Now, it also sounded a little bit AI sounding from the writing itself. They feel like it's AI slop. It's just as bad as a template at this point. The other issue is that each email was trying to make too many points at once. And confusing equals easy to ignore, right? If they don't know exactly what you do, where you fit into their universe, and what to do next, you're just going to get ignored. They're going to move on with their day. These are a couple of the points that we arrived at. So we rebuilt the copy from scratch. Everything else is the same list, same inboxes, right? Same volume. The next day with the tweaks launched, we got 60 positive replies. Okay. Then over the next 60 days, that same rebuild copy brought in over 2,200 positive replies. So we made sure none of it sounded like AI, and we were absolutely using AI to write these, but that's a powerful distinction. Does it sound like AI, right? If they can tell, you're dead. So we tweaked it until it sounded like just what a real person typing out a quick casual message might say. We also made the writing way, way simpler. We lowered the reading level, 8th grade or even lower. So it just read like a quick note from one person to another, and somebody scanning it, half paying attention, could still understand the message we were trying to get across. 50 to 80 words total. And honestly, if you can get closer to 50, it's better. If it looks like a big run-on paragraph or like a small essay, it's too long. You just have limited bandwidth. You cannot assign them homework. It needs to be quick, simple, to the point, and you need to wedge the door open a little bit. You're not going to sell them your product on this cold email. You're just trying to get an opportunity to present your pitch, basically. So we cut each email down to just one idea and one easy ask. So there was nothing to get confused about, nothing hard to reply to. And the ask was relatively soft, like a yes or no question, or we were offering them something useful, rather than immediately jumping down their throat for 30 minutes on the calendar in the first email. I should also add, we had a few versions of this email, right? So we had a few short versions for each type of buyer, which also helped us with results. We sent enough slightly different emails that I think from a spam filter perspective, it just looks way more natural, right? Than blasting one giant template, especially at the scale we were doing. The same message going to a ton of people, eventually they're going to be able to fingerprint that campaign, and it's going to throttle your results. If you're calling out a college or even like a social media post that they did, it just comes across as fake, People know what you're doing. They don't think you're actually interested in the social media posts that you're calling out. And it's better to just dispense with it, get right to the point, and try to find the people that are in the market for your thing right now. All right, once you have copy working, the replies are going to start coming in. But a reply and a lead is not necessarily a booked call yet. And so the difference between getting 2,200 positive replies, for example, and booking 665 calls comes down to how you handle that step. Now, there are three things that turn a reply into a booked call that shows up. You want to start by sorting the replies automatically, so you only spend time on people that are genuinely interested instead of reading through hundreds of out-of-office messages. This can be done with AI, and we have procedures for this at Beanstalk for our agency clients. And now, if I think about this client in particular, every reply runs through an AI prompt that sorts it into essentially one of 8 buckets. So you've got interested, meeting request, booked, out of office, wrong person, not interested, unsubscribe, or unknown. Now the reps are only going to see the ones with intent. So the interested people, meeting request, etc. And not every good reply gets the same treatment. So a meeting request, you just confirm, send times, go right for the kill. An interested might be like, tell me more. And you might want to send a one-line case study, maybe restate the exact same offer from the first email, and give them 2 times with a scheduling link. Even a wrong person reply can be gold, even though it might not look like it at first, because you might be able to ask who the right person is, get introduced, and now you're going in warm. Even a not interested, you could ask a quick why and get some interesting research or some tidbits like, hey, actually, if you come back to me in a few months, that no might be a yes. So either way, whatever scenario it is, you want to reply back within just a few minutes while they're still paying attention, because if you're able to answer in like 5 minutes, you're going to book way more calls than when you get to the next day. And that's why we have people on our team who handle leads right when the reply comes in. And our experience is that this one move of moving to a phone call as quickly as possible for the people you can find a phone number for is going to take booking rate from around 1/3 of positive replies to more like 70%. So it's a huge lift. So you always know what's working, where things are falling off, where are people falling out of your funnel. So if we come back to that 89% show rate for this client I mentioned at the start, a big part of that was coming from this last step, the speed that we were able to action these leads and the tracking. The moment a positive reply came in, an alert went straight to the sales team with everything that rep needed: the person's name, their company, exactly what they said, their email, their phone number if we could find it, a LinkedIn profile link, and a link to the CRM record. We're only enriching the phone number for the positive replies because that can get expensive. We don't want to pay to enrich people that never responded or said no, but for the people that are interested, we want to get them on the phone within minutes. While they're still interested, they still remember sending that email back. And all of this setup, we had wired straight into this client's CRM, HubSpot in this case. So no manual data entry. Positive reply creates a contact, logs the full reply, and gets tracked all the way from that cold email to closed revenue. You don't need any of the custom tools we built to do a simpler version of this for yourself. Your sending tool can probably sort your replies already. We've got a bunch of sequencers we like. Again, I'll link them in the description. And you can set things up so you get a notification the moment one is interested comes in, right? So you can reply at least somewhat quickly. And then I keep a simple tracker of who replied, who booked, and who showed up, either in your CRM or even on a spreadsheet. And that alone is going to tell you a lot about what's working and what you have to improve.